Hello and welcome to this video, and this video is going to be called Jazz and Elitism. Okay, I came in here this morning to shoot one video. It was going to be called The Death of Popular Music, and I filmed that, but of course I've got a moustache, and me being me, I couldn't not mention the moustache, so I mentioned the moustache. And then when I switched the video off, I thought I'm going to talk about the moustache. I'm going to talk about it. So I switched the camera on, and I just, stream of consciousness, talked about the moustache. A very silly video, just talked to the camera. I haven't done one for a while. And in that, I did poke fun at jazz fans. I am very sorry, jazz fans who are watching it. And I poked at fun at their elitism. I called them snobby and snotty. Now, then I switched the camera off, and I felt a bit bad because I'm a jazz fan, you know, and I am an elitist. And fundamentally, art is about elitism. Fundamentally, that's what it's about, right? So I felt a little bit bad. Now, so anyone who gets upset and goes, I'm a jazz fan and I'm not a snob, right? I will point to this video here, and any of you lot that watch this channel, I love you very much, and I really appreciate you supporting me. And a lot of the stuff I say is just to make you laugh. It's just silly banter, right? And I don't think you're all snobby, snotty, elitist jazz fans who think they're special because they own a couple of Thelonious Monk and Miles Davis albums, right? I don't think you're all like that, right? But there is a perception out there, right, that jazz is about elitism, right? And I want to talk a little bit about that, because of jazz originally was the complete opposite of that. When jazz emerged in the 1920s, it was a popular music form. You know, it was chaotic. People were upset when the first jazz record came out, which was Livery Stable Blues by the original Dixieland Jazz Band, where they did impersonations of animals on their instruments. This is one of the great innovations of jazz, is the integration of sound, of noise, and that the noise that reflects the world around you into popular music. People didn't know whether this was a novelty song. They didn't know whether this was just anarchy breaking out. Okay, if you listen to the great jazz musicians of the 1920s, like Jelly Roll Morton, or you listen to Louis Armstrong or King Oliver, any of those guys, you will hear that in the music. A lot of Louis' records have vocals, they have sound effects, they have narration, they have stuff which is very, very entertaining, right? This music was the alternative to the stuffy world of classical music and light opera. It was exciting, it was groovy, it was funky, it was transgressive, and it was popularist, okay? That music, once it's codified, and people like Louis Armstrong were the great geniuses that then codified it, and they codified it within the context of recorded music, right? Once they codified it, that starts to evolve into a high art form. I'm thinking of people like Duke Ellington and Count Basie, Art Tatum, but which is still really, really popular. And by the 1930s, the biggest selling artists in America are the big bands. You know, of course, it gets co-opted by, you know, the music business and channeled through white artists. Of course it is. You know, that happens straight away in the 1920s with Paul Whiteman, and then we see it later on with Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw. And to give those guys credit, you know, Benny Goodman and Artie Shaw always work with black musicians, and Benny Goodman is responsible, you know, for promoting three of the greatest jazz musicians in the history of jazz, which would be Teddy Wilson, Lionel Hampton, and Charlie Christian. I've done a video on Charlie Christian. Charlie Christian is like a giant in the history of jazz, and I don't think he gets the credit because he wasn't around for very long. You know, he had a working life of about 3 years, you know, and he was dead in his early 20s by 1942. And what Charlie Christian did was not only invent electric guitar playing, invent jazz guitar, but he, with his recordings over at Minton's, if you go and check those records out. Now, have I got it there? No, yes I have. I'll go and grab it now. I didn't even know I was going to be talking about this. This is a very rare record in my collection. It is Charlie Christian at Minton's, and it's a 10-inch record that my dad bought in the mid-50s. It's around about 65 years old now. And on that record, we can see the beginnings of bebop. Now, bebop, if you look there, Charlie Christian is in the biggest group in the world at that time. He's playing with Benny Goodman, and he's a featured soloist a lot of the time in that band. he's pioneering because he's playing electric guitar, so he can now integrate the guitar into what is a relatively loud band, a big band. But on the night, these younger musicians are experimenting, right? And they want to make a stamp. They want to divorce themselves from what has gone before. And this is the beginnings of bebop. And bebop's like a new language. And the reason, the way they divorce themselves from what's going on in sort of swing jazz is by just making the music so much harder, right? Then this implores people to take this music serious, treat it as an art, not to dance to it, but to sit and listen to it. It's a music form that is equal to classical music. It's a statement of the genius of Afro-American music. It's black music, and it's brilliant in that it can make a statement which is equal, and I think greater, than classical music. It's a high art form. It's gone from a popular art form to a high art form, and that's shut off all the old guys. So it's like punk, but it's like punk in reverse. You know, they have displaced what went before by creating music that's just unbelievably hard to play and difficult to listen to, right? And in the 1940s, we get the evolution of the sort of the jazz cat, the super sophisticated, super trendy, sharp dressing person that is speaking another language. This is one of the really interesting things with bebop. It didn't happen with free jazz or modal jazz or swing or any of that. You know, we get this idea of there's its own language, there's its own terms. This has shelved itself off. It has become very elitist. You're either a part of it or you're not, and if you're not, you won't get it. Okay? That was always there with jazz, but bebop really codifies that. And the difference is the music's difficult. The music's difficult. It's not popular. They're not selling millions of records like Glenn Miller, right? You have to be in the know. You have to know what's going on, all right? You have to sit and listen to the music. And to appreciate bebop and then all jazz that goes on after that is you have to understand the structure. You have to understand the armature. The armature is a thing that you have in art that sculptures are built within. Right, the art's there, but there's an armature, right? And in jazz, the armature is the structure of the song in terms of its harmonic structure, the chords, right, and the way that those chords are arranged in time. Okay. Now, this is really Western harmony. It's not innovation of jazz. All right, it's come from classical harmony. It's basically that you build from the ground up. You know, that you have a melody note, and that melody note is supported by a chord, and the note relates to that chord, and the melody, that the shape that goes through there is basically the idea of the horizontal harmony, which is the arrangement of notes from low to high, from the ground up, and then you have time, and if you take those notes and then drop them on a time, you get melody. Melody is the embodiment of that. That's like Western classical harmony, this idea of melody supported by harmonic structure and the rhythmical framework, which then relates to a bigger structural framework of the music. This is what a lot of classical music is about, the form. You know, it's about a symphony or cantata or whatever it is that they have. What jazz musicians, they take that and through the application of three things, which I've mentioned over and over again on this channel, one being the idea of improvisation. So you're going to have melodies, but those melodies are now improvised. You are going to play with a sense of swing or groove. Swing and groove is different to time, right? A waltz has got time, and you can dance to a waltz, but a waltz does not groove. It's not funky, right? And the application of your own individual voice into that sound, so you can express yourself through the timbre of your instrument, which you own. It's not something that belongs to the instrument, which if you're a classical musician, you learn violin, you've got to play the violin in a certain way, it's got to sound a certain way. If you're a jazz musician, you're in the old days were pushed to create your own sound. So and I've received a lot of flack for this idea, and people have gone, yeah, if you go back to the old days, there was loads of musicians copying Charlie Parker, and they all sound like, yeah, that's true. But the point I was trying to make was, back then, though, it was looked down upon. That the world of jazz frowned upon it. I've met older musicians that would be like, why is he copying that? That's not right. Can't he just go and get his own sound? And when you listen into interviews with old jazz musicians, that comes out. And what I'm describing that's happened in recent terms with jazz is that idea is gone. It's now very good, and you get rewarded for copying. That's the difference, right? And so what you had in the old jazz world at that point is musicians the really truly great musicians are great because of how different they are from each other. There's loads of great musicians around now, and there are differences there because we're all individuals, but when you look at the differences, what you see is that the differences are less, right? And also they are much more reliant on much older ideas from jazz 40, 50 years ago. You know, so if you hear someone do a jazz fusion keyboard solo, they're pretty much going to have the sound of Jan Hammer and what he pioneered, which was his sound, right? So the integration of these things within a harmonic framework, and that harmonic framework is difficult, it's hard, it's not diatonic, it's not just something you can find some notes like a blues musician and then just express yourself with those 5 notes and find, which is an incredible thing. That's the visceral end of improvisation. And that's another thing that I think is missing from modern jazz is the blues. I think that scream has gone. You know, I'm sure people are going to mention musicians that are doing that, but on the whole, I think it's gone. These ideas that emerge in bebop and then go forward into jazz, this idea that the structure's there and you have to understand the structure, right? That what you're listening to is not the tune. You're listening to a new piece of art that has been created by the nuclear reactor of jazz off the framework of this pop song or this modal scale or whatever it is. And new music is being created before your very eyes, but you have to understand that. You have to understand the structure. Now, most people, when confronted with that have grown up with just normal songs on the radio and they like a nice tune and they like to be able to hum along, it sounds to them like these musicians are all playing 4 different tunes all at the same time, right? And for the jazz fan, they will look at that and go, oh my God, they don't get it. Now, I've grown up with this all my life. I've been listening to, say, something like John Coltrane, and it's spine tingling. It's so emotional. It's so visceral, and it's so ordered at the same time. It's absolutely beautiful. But being told by people that that's just noise. You don't really like that, do you? You don't like that, do you? Yeah, I do. I love it. You doubt you're making that up because people really can't understand it. They don't understand it. And the response to that, if you're a jazz fan, is going, this is really frustrating because they're saying that this is just like technical stuff. They're just showing off. It's musical masturbation. And I'm getting these massive rushes and I'm really enjoying this. And I can't try and get this across to them. That, I think, starts to create the elitism. It's a very easy thing to jump and go, oh, these people don't understand it. You know, they're not sophisticated, right? And if you mix that with the very thing that's in bebop, the idea of the jazz cat, the existentialist, wide-eyed loner, you know, the Catcher in the Rye character that's on the edge of society, you know, and they've got their own language and their own music, that idea of the outsider. I was very influenced growing up by a book by Colin Wilson called The Outsider. It actually changed my life. And I think the concept of outsiderness is really embodied in jazz. And so many of the jazz greats that we discuss, from Charlie Parker to Jaco Pastorius, you know, these guys are outsiders. Django Reinhardt, they're outsiders, right? And I think when you put all that together, there's this really exciting, transgressive, creative part of jazz, which is really exciting. But once that becomes codified, once it starts to get nailed, the elitism that is there, right, the sophistication of being cool, right? The idea that Miles Davis Miles Davis invented being cool. You know, when I grew up, our big hero in the 1970s was the Fonz, and the Fonz was cool, you know, and that is the travel of the idea of cool from the 1940s, 50s, the idea of Miles Davis cool, to the idea of Fonz cool. I have got a little bit of a story about the Fonz that I'll tell you now. It's got nothing to do with this. The Fonz visited my kid's school, right? And I didn't know this. And my house at that time was right next to the school. And I was putting my drums in the car. My wife was in the house. And as I was putting the drums in my car, I looked, and at the end of my drive, pulling up in a car and getting out, was the Fonz. And I was able, and I must be one of the few people in history that was actually able to use this phrase and it be true, right? So you think about this, how many people have said this phrase and it wasn't true? They were just lying, they were liars, right? But I was actually able to use it as an actual truth statement that could be verified. And I ran into the house and I said to my wife, hey, it's the Fonz. I was able to actually use that phrase. And why was that important? Why was it important to point at the Fonz and say, hey, it's the Fonz? Because the Fonz was cool, right? These are the elements that create this elitism in jazz, right? And I think the elitism is a double-edged sword. It's good, but it's also bad at the same time. And the big problem with all music, all art forms, is when it gets codified. Once somebody starts to come along and tell you how things should be done, right? Shoulds and oughts, right? Anyone who knows, which was the philosopher, is it Hume? You know, when you say the word should, oh, you're not doing that right, should be done like this. You're pointing to some platonic other realm that doesn't exist. It's the realm of the perfection. The realm of perfection. The realm of the perfection. If you put the on something, you're always, as soon as you say the, you're making it a subject. It's like it becomes a thing that you can hold in your hand, the thing, rather than thing. Right? This is the whole dichotomy of human existence here, right? These things most things operate in a binary. It's like yin and yang, and they're like every single video I end up talking about this, don't I? Every single video, whatever I talk about, I end up on this. I think it's my worldview, and if you like it, you like it. And I think it exists with the elitism. The elitism can be very transgressive. It can put you as an outsider, and outsiders see the world differently, and seeing the world differently is important because all new stuff is created by people who see the world differently. But once it gets codified in colleges and music schools and with music teachers and art teachers, and they say this is how it should be done, if you don't do this you're no good, it has to be like this, blah 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 blah, you know, then suddenly the rules come along and it starts to strangle the creativity of the art form. But the people who are involved in that, they are just basically superstitiously going around the same circle of rules. And they go, I played through that jazz tune, I hit all the chord tones, I hit a few coloured tones, I played some licks that I've been rehearsing for the past 6 months, I have created a good jazz solo, right? And if you don't like it, it's because you don't understand it, and I've done the work, and I've got this, and I've got these skills, and you should appreciate me for these skills, but you don't appreciate me because you don't understand it, because you're not sophisticated enough, and I'm basically sophisticated and you're not sophisticated. And that has always been the thing that hobbles jazz. Always it has hobbled jazz. And it's probably hobbled jazz for so many years now, for the past 40 years, that the art form has become a little bit samey, right? I'm not going to say all modern jazz is samey, all modern jazz is predictable, all modern jazz is based upon approaches that are now 40 or 50 or 60 years old. I'm not going to say all is, I'm saying there's a tendency there. And when I did the videos earlier on that did really well, because I think it upset and also confirmed certain ideas that are floating out there in jazz. I think I pricked a bubble when I said that, but I didn't talk about the elitism, and I promised that I would do a funny video where I took the mickey out of the jazz elitists in the same way as I took out the anal retentive sort of boundary loving qualities of the average progressive rock fan on my biscuit video. And if you want to check out my top 10 biscuits, you may see that there's an underlying reason why I did that. I'm going to tell you, you can go watch it. Go watch it, see why did I do the top 10 biscuit video, and why did I do that to a room full of progressive rock fans, I can't think of a way of pricking that pretentious bubble that many jazz fans have, that elitist view of themselves and how they can embody themselves with higher qualities of worth through their love of jazz. I haven't worked a way out of doing that yet. I might have. Watch the videos. Might have something to do with the moustache. What do you think? It ain't going to last, is it? Anyway, that was my rambling, incoherent, stultified thoughts on elitism and jazz. I hope you liked it. If you did like it, then press like. And if you want to see some more stuff like this, then say in the comments and tell me you do. And if you don't agree, then say you don't agree and we'll have a discussion, maybe. And if you want to see some more, ring the notification bell. And if you want to support me on Patreon, I'm here. Come support me down here. There's the link. There's the link there, down there, right now. Click on Patreon, go and have a look. There's loads of stuff there. There's loads of stuff there, and you can chat to me and all sorts of things. And I might do a Patreon video now, I think, for the patrons. A Patreon exclusive. You won't know what that's about. It'll be really, really good. Really good. Way better than anything I do here. Way better. You won't see it because you're not a Patreon. Thanks for watching. See you on the next video.